بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الله نور السماوات والأرض مثل نوره كمشكاة فيها مصباح
المصباح في زجاجة الزجاجة كأنها كوكب دري يوقد من شجرة مباركة زيتونة لا شرقية ولا غربية يكاد زيتها يضيء ولو لم تمسسه نار نور على نور يهدي الله لنوره من يشاء ويضرب الله الأمثال للناس والله بكل شيء عليم صدق الله العظيم.
25 years ago marked the beginning of a new era in the history of our Jamaat. Since 1985, the Ismaili Centre London has helped to shape the identity and outlook of Ismailis both nationally and internationally, giving the Jamaat a permanent home in London. As we look back on 25 years of the Ismaili Centre, we have an opportunity to reflect on what this building has done for the Jamaat in the UK, for the Ismaili community globally, the role it has played in promoting civil society, and what it will, inshallah, do for the future of the Ismaili Jamaat around the world.
The Ismaili community in Britain traces many of its roots to this country's former colonies in Africa and in Asia. Over this past half-century, Ismailis have established themselves as one amongst many immigrant communities. It is not far from this very site in Kensington that a few young Ismaili students and families first gathered to share the experiences of life in post-war London during the Empire's twilight years.
In the early 1950s, the first place of gathering for the Jamaat in London was at 51 Kensington Court. This Jamaat Khana was opened by the late Begum Habibe, the wife of our 48th Imam, on 17th July 1953. In 1957, the Jamaat moved to 35 Palace Gate, which was home to the Jamaat for many years. Aside from being a Jamaat Khana, Palace Gate also provided bed and breakfast accommodation for students arriving from abroad to study in London.
In the late 60s, the Jamaat began to increase with students, visitors, and overseas Ismailis, and the Jamaat Khana facilities began to be stressed. Maulana Hazir Imam felt that we should look for alternate property for Jamaat Khana. In his Farman at Alexandra Palace on 3rd August 1969, where about 2,500 members were present, Maulana Hazir Imam mentioned that he was aware of the need for a bigger Jamaat Khana, and that we were already looking for a suitable alternate property.
As the presence of the Ismailis in Britain changed from a handful of adventurous students to an increasingly large, permanently established community, originating from different parts of the Third World, speaking different languages, and with very different economic and educational backgrounds, the leaders and I were faced with the difficult question of determining the steps that we should take to assist the community to establish itself well and definitively in the United Kingdom. We concluded that centers of social and religious life were a condition sine qua non to enable the community to practice its faith, maintain its traditions, and protect its identity.
It was in 1978 that when Hazrat Imam first, we had a meeting, the president of the council then and myself, and Hazrat Imam explained to us what the project was going to be, and that he wanted a purpose-built, high-profile Jamaat Khana in London for the Jamaat in United Kingdom.
The history of the site of land for the Ismaili Center can be traced back to the 1860s. 7 houses dubbed Cromwell Gardens were erected on the site in 1867 by John Spicer. In 1937, the site was purchased by the Shakespeare Memorial National Theatre Committee for the purpose of constructing a national theatre.
I suppose that I am here as the next best thing to Shakespeare.
Although the title deeds were presented in 1938 by Irish playwright George Bernard Shaw, the theatre was never to be built on the site. In time, it was realized that the site was too small for the ambitions of a national theatre, and in 1942, the land was exchanged by the National Theatre Committee in favor of a site on the south bank of the Thames. By the time Maulana Hazrat Imam had secured the land in the late 1970s for the establishment of the first Ismaili Center in the Western world, it had become a derelict site, hosting a car hire depot and a prefab office. Yet, according to journalist Christopher Long, the land between Thurlow Place and Cromwell Road was arguably the most prominent and prestigious plot of development land in West London. On 6 September 1979, Maulana Hazrat Imam and the late Lord Soames, who at the time was the Lord President of the Council and the leader of the House of Lords, laid the foundation for the Ismaili Centre in London.
I sincerely believe that when this centre is completed, it will be, both by its presence and the function it fulfills, an important addition to the institutions of London, a source of pride to all who took part in its creation, and a pledge and token of understanding between East and West.
Speaking at the ceremony, Lord Soames commended the Jamaat in the United Kingdom for being contributing citizens of society.
And wherever they have settled, they have made themselves most welcome. Indeed, in many ways and in many instances, they have set an example. The Ismailis are essentially contributors who seek to enrich the social structure in which they live. The centre, of which this is to be the cornerstone, will fill a long-felt need by the 25,000 or so Ismaili people in this country, for it will provide both a place of prayer and devotion and also a meeting place with many facilities of a pleasurable character.
plans for the new building were carefully drawn up with Maulana Hazar Imam and his brother Prince Amin closely involved every step of the way.
I think everybody would only ever and could only ever settle for the highest standards. I think also it was realized from His Highness's involvement and Prince Amin's involvement that it had to be something which was going to meet their very, very high standards. Indeed, quite a number of the designs, the features that you see dotted around the building, they would have been created in isolation, and Prince Amin or His Highness would come in especially to review that relationship between the blue and the white lines and give a positive to go ahead and construct and design in that manner.
I must say that it was dearly due to Hazar Imam that this building has turned out to be what it is. His personal involvement was quite extensive. We had 39 meetings over a period of 5 years with Hazar Imam and Prince Amin. He would literally look at the size of the window, the shape of the window, the doorknobs, the calligraphy, the lighting system. He used to go in great detail in every aspect of construction. And Prince Amin was involved in the interior designing.
The high-profile location of the centre presented a unique challenge to the architects, the Casson-Conder partnership. Lead architect, the late Neville Conder and his team, had to design a building that would meet the community's objectives, as well as blend in harmoniously with the distinguished public and historic buildings in its vicinity.
Another factor in the design is, of course, that here were we, a firm of Western English architects, working directly with His Highness the Aga Khan, trying to evolve an architecture without, as it were, being Walt Disney about it, putting a little dome here or a little something there on an architecture which one didn't deeply understand. And this was only done by working very closely and a long learning process by people who were deeply involved in that kind of culture.
To help ensure this Islamic mood, German Muslim Karl Schlaminger was commissioned for the interior design, and renowned Pakistani artist, the late Gulji, was asked to create a number of portraits and murals for the building. By 1984, the building was ready to be used. Maulana Hazar Imam sent a message to the UK Jamaat in which he said, "During my Silver Jubilee Darbar in London, I said that the Ismaili Center is a symbol of the status that I desire for my Jamaat in the United Kingdom. It is you who, inshallah, will translate my aspiration into reality in everything which touches your everyday lives, and by the way in which you think about, use, and work within this new center."
We moved here on the 10th of April to open the Jamaat Khana. It was very happy and historical occasion because Jamaat appreciated that this is the first time in central London we have a Ismaili Center on a very prestigious location.
In his speech at the foundation ceremony of the Ismaili Center Dubai, Maulana Hazar Imam reminds us that the Jamaat Khana is one of many forms of spaces of gathering in the Muslim world.
For many centuries, a prominent feature of the Muslim religious landscape has been the variety of spaces of gathering coexisting harmoniously with the masjid, which in itself has accommodated a range of diverse institutional spaces for educational, social, and reflective purposes. Historically serving communities of different interpretations and spiritual affiliations, these spaces have retained their cultural nomenclatures and characteristics, from ribat and zawiya to Khanaqah and Jamaat Khana. The congregational space incorporated within the Ismaili Center belongs to the historic category of Jamaat Khana, an institutional category that also serves a number of sister Sunni and Shia communities in their respective contexts in many parts of the world. Here, it will be a space reserved for traditions and practices specific to the Shia Ismaili Tariqah of Islam.
On 24th April 1985, the Ismaili Center, London, a Silver Jubilee project, was officially opened by Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher in the presence of Maulana Hazar Imam and members of his family.
London itself is enhanced by the construction of the new centre, for which we are all most grateful to His Highness the Aga Khan. It's a splendid contribution to the architecture of London, fitting in easily with the other fine buildings of South Kensington, yet having its own distinctive and beautiful character. It's a monument to the determination of your community to play a full part in the life of our society, while at the same time retaining their own identity and independence. As I believe a great Islamic poet of the 19th century, Muhammad Iqbal, said, "For the individual to be bound to society is a blessing. It is in a community that his work is perfected." This new center is a splendid testament to the words of the poet, to the vitality of the Ismaili community here. And it is in that spirit and with great pleasure that I now formally declare the Ismaili Center open.
This invocation, central to the Muslim faith, greets visitors as they enter the Ismaili Center in London. Water ripples from a seven-sided marble fountain, drowning out the sounds of central London traffic outside.
You walk towards this building in the evening after your day at work, and these doors suddenly mark the space between what is outside and something very different which is inside. You're greeted by a space which is not about hustle and bustle. It's a space which is very much about making an inner shift as well as an external shift. So there is an external shift where you're walking from the outside to the space, but also internally you're met with a space which is very much about serenity, very much about tranquility, very much about touching one's inner self, which is something that the reality is that, you know, in London's everyday, very busy lifestyle, you don't get a lot of time to do.
The centre soon became a hub for the community to congregate, pray and socialise. Whether it be local events for the Darkhana Jamaat, national or international events, gatherings of seniors, of youth, of professionals, of volunteers, meetings, exhibitions, presentations or seminars, the various spaces in the centre continue to provide an environment of community, togetherness and unity for the UK Jamaat. An entire generation in the Jamaat today have grown up with the Ismaili Center. In many cases, the building has played a central role in their lives, a space where they carry out voluntary work, where they meet friends and socialize, as well as a space where they carry out their religious obligations.
The Ismaili Center is my local Jamaat Khana. I've been coming here since I was born, and it really is a second home for me. It's somewhere that I come to pray, obviously, but also to develop my understanding of my culture, of my heritage, to learn more, like today visiting the roof gardens, understanding how that came to be, the exhibitions that are shown here. It's also somewhere that I come to reflect, to contemplate, to nurture my spirituality.
And also, of course, which makes a tremendous impact on people, and that is the volunteer spirit within the community itself, from the younger volunteer corps members up to more senior level and up to council level and indeed even president, that at the end of the day everybody is a volunteer. And if you are asked to come in and do the cloakroom, and if you're asked to do the shoes, etc., if in fact you've got the time to do it, it always seemed to me that people would jump at the opportunity. I don't think necessarily that the years have dimmed that enthusiasm. It has been a strong ethos of the community.
If you came into this building of a day, you'd see the Safai ladies cleaning the building, or you might see our volunteers working in Jamaat Khana, or you would see volunteers working in the shoe area or the court area, committee members working throughout the building. And in every corner of the building, you see a community living its values of seva, of compassion, of unity, of brotherhood. And that is not just aspirational, that's quite inspirational. This building has its own heartbeat, and it's really quite special to watch.
One of the greatest testaments of this voluntary spirit, and one of the fondest memories for the Jamaat, is the 1994 UK Padhramni, when Maulana Hazar Imam visited the Ismaili Center daily for various religious ceremonies and meetings. The Ismaili Center has also played an important role for the global Jamaat, with numerous institutions using the building to host meetings, conferences and presentations. The building, and as importantly the volunteers, have helped to ensure that events run as efficiently and effectively as possible. The Ismaili Center has also become a must-see for any Ismailis travelling through London.
This building was a Silver Jubilee project.
For many in the Jamaat, it is seen as a part of the contemporary history of the community.
It's a breathtaking building, just the different aspects of it is very inspiring, I would say. I mean, it's just so different from what you see in a Jamaat Khana that I go to. And then you come here and you see this, it's like, it's a whole different take on it.
Following on from the success of the 1994 Padhramni, Maulana Hazar Imam blessed the Jamaat by celebrating his 40th Imamat Day at the Ismaili Center. In October 2003, the Institute of Ismaili Studies hosted a conference on the Holy Quran at the center to mark its 25th anniversary.
The venue of this international colloquium is particularly appropriate. In its architectural design and definition of broader functions, the Ismaili Centre in London, like its counterparts in other countries, has been conceived in a mood of dialogue, of humility, of friendship, and of harmony. These centres reflect a commitment to permeate excellence of endeavour in the realms of the intellect and the spirit.
It is this commitment that has also led the building to become an important space for civil society.
We took the decision to begin using the centre in a much more proactive way. You know, we threw it open then, not only for our own events, but for other organisations that were sympathetic to ours in some way to use the centre for themselves.
Faith groups, political parties, interfaith organisations, volunteer groups, and a whole host of other bodies use the Ismaili Center for meetings and conferences. The annual Milad-e-Nabi address and regular Ismaili Center lecture series have been a cornerstone of the center's activities. The lectures have featured an impressive list of speakers, including authors, politicians, academics, and civil society leaders.
I'm delighted to be in this really wonderful space, which this morning I toured and felt the silence and the reverberation of something that is very special right here in the heart of London on Cromwell Road. I could feel my blood running in my veins, it was so silent. And it's a very great privilege in the center of a great metropolis.
One of the great benefits of this building is that it's allowed us to really develop a whole series of events that we've put on to promote and develop our own culture. We've run here exhibitions, we've run here seminars, we've had plays, we've had musical concerts, and these are all events that promote our culture, but it's a culture that we're very proud to share with others. And part of what the building allows us to do is to showcase that culture.
What is this Seymour?
This culture is displayed through numerous events, including 2 impressive theatrical productions held at the Ismaili Center in the 1990s, the Conference of the Birds, and later the Island of Animals, based on a fable of the Ikhwan al-Safa.
You know, we're situated here in an area that has a very clear focus on culture, amongst some absolutely leading world-class, culturally important institutions. The V&A Museum, you've got the National History Museum, you've got the Royal Geographic Society, you've got the Science Museum. These are absolutely world-class institutions. And it's a great privilege for us to be part of this golden thread of culture. But it means that we have a role to play. And our role here is to be able to demonstrate that as a Muslim civil society institution, we too can add to the cultural environment of this country. We too can add knowledge. We too can add to the quality of life and to the ambience of the environment. And in all of these ways, you know, we provide a very useful role.
For a number of years, the Ismaili Center has also been part of London's Open House and Open Gardens events, where the building is open to all of London to come and visit. Thousands of people have visited the center over the years.
It is truly beautiful, very tranquil, spiritual, calming space that we thoroughly enjoyed. Beautiful.
I've passed the building for years, but I've always wondered what it was for. I used to drive by it, but the opportunity to come inside the building was wonderful.
One of the most unique features of the building is the roof garden. In the Islamic world, gardens are seen as a place of peace, an escape from the noise outside, a place of serenity and tranquility. The idea of a garden designed on the model of the Chahar Bagh, the four-part Islamic garden, in the heart of central London, in a space from which you can look up to the domes of the Victoria and Albert Museum, and at the same time be totally unaffected by the sounds of the traffic below, is something that most people just don't expect. In the last few years, we have also taken an active role in the annual Exhibition Road Music Day, where the centre has hosted recitals and performances, and these Ismaili volunteers have served all the institutions along the road.
Does anyone play, or even if you don't play guitar, would you like to have a go?
I think music has the power to unite the world.
Yeah, I found it really amazing. I come from India where we don't have any concept of this kind. But
well, I'd always been interested in the Ismaili Centre, and I kind of wanted to see what it was like from the inside.
The sense of love and harmony between cultures, between nations, I just felt was remarkable.
Over the last 25 years, a number of dignitaries have visited the Ismaili Centre. The centre was again a key part of Maulana Hazari Imam's Golden Jubilee celebrations. Important dignitaries visited, including politicians such as the current Prime Minister David Cameron and London Mayor Boris Johnson. One of the most significant exhibitions to be held at the Ismaili Centre was the Spirit and Life exhibition, opened by Maulana Hazari Imam and Prince Charles.
We hope and trust it will contribute to a deeper understanding among cultures, to the strengthening of true cultural pluralism, which is increasingly essential to peace and to progress in our world. This is an appropriate place for us to share in this vision and to talk about that objective.
Prince Charles also commented on the values of the Jamaat.
Your Highness, if I may, I would just like to say a brief word about the Ismaili community in this country and the contribution they make to modern British society. For I can only applaud your emphasis on intellectual and cultural exploration as a means of integration, and your determination to discharge your obligations as citizens of this country without losing your own distinctive traditions. I have no doubt that the existence of shared values is a key defining factor. These values celebrate humility, greatness of soul, honor, magnanimity, and indeed hospitality, consideration to others, and courtesy. They form the bedrock of the excellent outreach work of the Ismaili Centre. And these shared values are perhaps the greatest of the treasures displayed here today.
It is these values which have served the Jamaat so well for so many years, and particularly over the last quarter of a century of the Ismaili Centre.
This building speaks to our notions of beauty. It speaks to the value that we put on community cohesion, the value that we put on the spirit of community. It speaks to the emphasis we put on equality between men and women, between young and old, between rich and poor. And anyone who comes to this building can see these things. We don't need to articulate them. The